And we are back once again with Faces of Stone. I am Marc-Anthony Macon.
I'm Noah Diamond.
I'm Amanda Sisk.
And we are back once again with Faces once again, I've forgotten to turn off my...
it's just like old times.
It's... we are back once again.
Wait a minute. I don't have anything else on, do I?
There we go. Okay.
Okay. I always assume it's me. It never is.
There you are. That looked just like you.
So, Arrested Development.
Faces of Stone.
Do you have our
sound edition?
Do you have...
What's that? Do I have a subtitle?
No, do you have our soundbite?
Where's your face, Marc-Anthony? Where's your face?
Oh, I didn't prepare that. We should explain, for the benefit of anyone who has just wandered in, that we began last summer, the three of us, discussing Twin Peaks: The Return live on YouTube right after the episodes aired. And it was such rollicking fun that we decided as soon as a fourth season of Twin Peaks comes out, we'll talk about that. But in the meantime, just in case, in the interim, while Frost and Lynch finish that up for us.
Right.
Why not talk about
this movement? I really am. I'm sorry.
My
thing is falling apart.
This
is what happens. This is what happens when you build this enormous structure out of like candles and. I mean, we're very, very, very high tech here at Faces of Stone. I don't want you to think we're not. But no, sometimes we just want to, go back to the old days when we crafted with our hands. When people crafted with their hands and not machines. Faces of Stone. You can't see my face right now. All right, go ahead, please. Please go ahead and stop letting me talk.
But we all like Arrested Development, and it has returned again.
Right.
And we thought, why not talk about that?
So before we dive into the fifth season, do we want to take a minute to talk about the remixed fourth season? Do we want to?
Yeah, the remixed fourth season and our feelings about this series in general. We might as well. You want to kick that off, MA?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that, first of all, this was a series that I went into expecting I wasn't going to like it.
Did you watch it when it first was broadcast?
I think I watched it maybe the first time that it was rebroadcast. I think that a friend talked me into watching it, and I was thinking I'm just going to humor them. I'm not really going to like this show that much, but I ended up really liking it quite a lot. So, and then it had a short run, which was disappointing. But I kind of thought, well, we'll similar to Twin Peaks in that way, we'll always have. The episodes that exist, and when the fourth season came out, that was a special treat, and watching the remixed fourth season was different.
Yeah, I thought so too. I think I had a similar, maybe Amanda and I both were also kind of late to Arrested Development. I think, like a lot of things that have a very passionate cult following, that the passion of its admirers can make you a little wary.
Yeah.
Because you hear so much about how brilliant it is. You hear references to it that you don't get. And you think, I don't know, this sounds like a big pain in the ass.
It just means you have to work harder to have a Senecan attitude going into this.
I watched it because of the protest sign.
I was just going to cue that up
there
for you.
There were, these pictures of all these protest signs during the God, what was it for? Was it?
It was during the Iraq War, I think.
Okay, yeah, I knew it wasn't for that other guy. And it was during the Iraq War, and there was this picture of this guy standing in the middle of a protest with a sign that said, "Bring back Arrested Development." And I decided, okay, you know what? This guy is probably my kind of fella. And so I don't know if I started watching this one at night when I couldn't sleep, or The Office at night when I couldn't sleep. Noah would know.
I think maybe we went through The Office first, actually.
Okay.
But
no, I know. I remember this. I did. I watched this while you were out of town, and I had hurt my leg and I couldn't go running. So I watched this and made you watch it when you came back. And that's how we watched Arrested Development. See, friends, it's not like this is scripted. We're really just going from the heart and from the moment.
Yeah, and I remember feeling like relieved that you had liked it. I thought, oh, good, it's had this test audience now in you, and if you're telling me I'll like it, then I probably really will. But now we're talking about the original 3 seasons,
right?
Which is really kind of 2.5 seasons. The third was very abbreviated and wrapped itself up with a sort of comical speed when the creators realized they weren't going to have a full season to finish their story. And the last 2 episodes of the original 3 seasons are a masterpiece of let's get this going then. And and
the plugs, all the plugs for Tell Your Friends. I
Tell
mean,
Your
they
Friends, yes.
smashed so much of that in there and talked about, shows that got cut off because they, even though they had a huge public following, and they talked just brilliant.
And the very last moments of the 3rd season have Ron Howard as himself suggesting that perhaps this should be a movie, which made us all think that if it ever came back, it would come back as a film. That 3rd season ended in 2006, and it was 7 years later that we got a 4th season on Netflix in 2013. The 4th season originally aired in episodes of varying lengths, each 15 episodes of varying lengths, sort of 20 to 40 minutes long, each dealing with one specific member of the cast. And then the 4th season was just recently, in anticipation of the 5th, released in what by Arrested Development standards is a more conventional format of 22 sort of broadcast length episodes.
It's The Godfather, the epic. The Godfather epic. They took it and they put it all together in order because some people need it that way. And you know what? I actually liked it. I liked it a lot. But
wait, are you talking about The Godfather or are you talking about Arrested Development? You liked which one?
Both.
Okay.
Both. But right now I'm talking about Arrested Development. I did like it, but I also have some sort of issue with having to take things and put them in a chronological order. Because one of the things I like most about any kind of piece that I'm watching is if things are going backwards and forwards, or things are tangled in time, how things relate to one another in time. That's why things are so interesting. So to have to follow everything chronologically sometimes bugs me. So I did enjoy season 4.
Maybe because the first time that I saw it, I was so delighted by that format that watching it this way many times seemed a bit tedious. I really just I found myself not as engaged as I was watching it the way that it was originally presented. I still did enjoy it, but nowhere near as much.
If you go straight through, you don't have to recap. And so there are recaps for things that had just happened and that you were about to watch. And it just seemed like a normal. I did want to say though, okay, so we were getting ready for this and I thought, for Twin Peaks, you would the an owl earrings or an owl necklace or something, and I couldn't fix. And I have a pair of cutoffs, so I was gonna wear those and be an ever nude, but I can't find those. So what I am is I'm not wearing pants at all, and that's my tribute to this video cast. Is I'm not wearing pants. You will never know it, but I'm not wearing pants, and it's the truth.
This is already our best work.
Second, though, I did, before we go into season 4 into season 5, I think we got to talk about Michael Cera.
Yes, we are kind of doing a series of discussions of Michael Cera's television work, aren't we?
Yes. And did you suddenly look at him? Did you think, oh my God, before I watch this, we're going to see Wally Brando? Or did you get surprised when Wally Brando showed up? Did it hit you? When did it hit you?
When he showed up the first time that we saw him, it was a moment of, for me at least, oh, it's George Michael, but he's kind of always going to be Wally Brando to me from now on. There's
that one scene is going to trump the entire.
That one monologue has sealed him in my brain as Wally Brando.
That's brilliant.
I did not think during the Wally Brando scene in Twin Peaks: The Return, oh, it's George Michael Bluth.
No, I did not.
No, I didn't either. I never did. You're right.
Thank God for that.
I think Arrested Development. The discussion of, I think seasons 4 and 5 are something slightly different from seasons 1 through 3, and I think this is a show that set a kind of impossible bar for itself. Not just because of the generally very high quality of the first 3 seasons, but because has there ever been a more indulgently self-referential comedy than Arrested Development? I mean, this is the show that literally had Henry Winkler jumping over a shark. Was that season 2 or 3? But I mean, which is, of course, that is a brilliant moment. And it's something only this show and maybe The Simpsons could do. And yet,
The Simpsons hasn't done it yet.
Yeah. And yet, if you're going to do that, you really, boy, the show itself better not ever jump the shark. Season 4, I came away from the original cut of season 4 feeling kind of mixed feelings about it. I couldn't really go along with the people who said they've made a terrible mistake and the whole thing doesn't work anymore. And there were those who said that, who just wished the 4th season had never happened. Nor could I completely go along with those who said, oh, it's a total return to form, it's back and better than ever. And I felt like the structural innovations of it were very interesting, but I enjoyed the remixed version at least as much, possibly a little more, which makes me think the structural innovations weren't all it had going for it. A lot of people were bothered by the fact that the 4th season was sort of structured in accordance with how hard it was to get the whole cast together. And so that's why the episodes tended to focus on one character and why it was a little hard, the season was a little hard put to get all the Bluths in one room together. I don't know. That sounds like a problem, but it never really bothered me so much when I was watching it. I do think the word tedious, which you use, Marc-Anthony, to describe the remix, for me, both versions of season 4 have their stretches which are tedious. And maybe season 5 shows some signs of that too. Like there are sometimes entire storylines that I just wish were not there. In season 4, for me, the biggie is the story with Maria Bamford as Debris. Maria Bamford is really great. I really like her a lot, but it's just too awful and painful and sad what she goes through in her story with Tobias. And it reminded me a little bit of my feelings about the story with Charlize Theron as Rita in season 3, which is it just misses the mark just enough that you're left with the tremendous wrongness of what's happening. And doing that successfully is what the show does when it's really good too.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm on the opposite side of that spectrum. I really really enjoyed the way that season 4 played out initially. But I do agree that there are some things in both of those seasons. And I mean, maybe if I were to revisit the first 3 seasons too, that I just kind of feel like, oh, I don't know if I want to watch more of this.
Season 4, I remember feeling like it started very slow, both versions of it. It really picks up a lot of speed and steam as it goes and gets more interesting. I remember feeling like that scene in the dorm room, who's going to get voted out of the dorm, feeling like that went on for days.
So, okay, let's move on to season 5. And I mean, before we really talk about the specifics of what, worked or didn't work or whatever, I mean, let's talk about Jeffrey Tambor and what the, dynamic must be with the cast right now. It's an awkward thing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I've been following that. I knowing we were going to be talking about Arrested Development and just following the news and what's going on. I've read what his accusers have said and what he has said and what the rest of the Arrested Development cast has said, and that much discussed New York Times interview with all of them. I have to admit that I wasn't thinking about it while watching these episodes. I mean, I take the accusations against him seriously. I take seriously also his defenses of himself and what he and others have said about some of the extenuating circumstances on Transparent. It seems to me that if the worst that he's been accused of is true, then he is a difficult guy with some problems. It sounds like he can be, you know, at times really bad to work with. And if there is indeed an element of harassment, as in the accusations on the Transparent set, that's disappointing to hear about him. But I don't think it classes him as a total monster, as in the case of Bill Cosby, who, even if I wanted to, I just can't enjoy his work anymore because the sound of his voice just doesn't mean to me what it used to. And that's a great loss because I did think he was a great artist. At this point, Jeffrey Tambor, for me, is not on the list of people whose work is just off the shelf.
I just can't even, I mean, I can't segment it into this particular conversation. I don't think I should even start because I think I could take up this whole podcast if I started. My feelings are so complicated. I think everybody's feelings are complicated, of course. So yeah, I don't know. I don't want to make myself mad at myself for saying anything. Let's move on.
Okay. We'll move on to the show proper then.
But I guess, yes. but maybe we can just close that subject by saying, you know, we all feel a lot about it and conflicted about it. But just the fact that we're here talking about this show, all three of us are at least able to, you know, remain fans and viewers and now public analysts of Arrested Development. We all hope that everybody involved is as kind to each other as they can ever be. Love each other, as the dying postman said in season 4.
So I kind of wanted to just start throwing out things that I really liked, and I thought we could do the same because I don't know if we need to go chronologically.
No.
This. So of course the first Buster scene is brilliant, everything about it, but Buster in general I think seems much wiser. He knows more. He understands more. He has jokes with the family about Michael. I think Buster seems like he's grown some, or maybe I'm just hoping, but I do think Buster's grown. That first scene with the damn scuba mask and he screams and he comes to.
It's a great entrance for Buster.
Wait, doesn't you think he seems a little different? And I don't just mean older.
I don't know if this is the behind the scenes explanation, but it seems to me that the actors on the show whose stars have risen the most, their characters have become richer and more interesting. I mean, Tony Hale, since Arrested Development, has become a pretty big star on Veep. You know, he's wonderful on Veep and very acclaimed, and he's become a major figure in comedy. And also Aaliyah Shawkat, who I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, who plays Maybe. She also, I mean, she's really been on the rise and has done interesting work on other series lately. And Maybe in the 5th season seems to me, she was always a really interesting and compelling and odd character. But
so fucking weird.
Yeah. But for me, her scenes with Michael Cera are some of the real highlights of the, I guess, I've watched 4 of these new episodes, of which 8 are now available. Yeah, she's doing amazing work. And I think maybe started off as a character who they didn't know exactly who she was. And now that is precisely what makes her such an interesting character.
Yes.
Yes, I agree. She's so weird though, but she's so amazing that what she'll let them do and make her do. And there was a panel or something where they asked who's the character most like who's an actor most like their character, and they all immediately said her, which is amazing. That like they how can that be? You know, this character's
Isn't that terrifying to all of you?
And how can that possibly be that somebody is like that in the real world? But it's funny. Okay, so Buster's scream and the way they do it is amazing. They have this slow thing and this music underneath, and Michael talking about his child and all that, seeing the two different suits flashing back. I mean, it takes forever before Buster jumps up, which is one of the reasons that it's so funny. Buster jumps up screaming, and he's the one in the fucking mask. Also, he's wearing the flippers too. And if you're putting this on to protect yourself from the fumigator, you don't need the flippers. So he's got the flippers on, and he jumps up screaming, and he's wearing this little outfit or whatever. He jumps up screaming again and wears this little outfit. Hold on, I have 2 sets of notes, and one of them is separated by my journal, which I don't want to read out loud. And so, fuck it. So the second question is, why would he think that when somebody's fumigating something, you have to stay in the attic? Like, you're supposed to stay in the attic. Because it seems like he's like, oh, you and George Michael had these outfits to stay in the attic. And you didn't get, I mean, why does he think that scuba gear is for staying in the attic when it's being fumigated?
Is it because he has like an oxygen mask on?
No, but that's what I'm saying. He puts all that on because he knows the house is going to be fumigated. But he speaks as though that's what you're supposed to do.
He may have inferred that, like he was in the attic at some point. He saw the scuba equipment and figured, well, why would you have something like this up here unless it was, to breathe if the house is being fumigated?
I guess. And then my final thing about that scene is that in the background, when they're talking, is like a theatrical color wheel. I don't know if that was like an Easter egg or something.
It's the first of many examples, not only in this season, but this series has a long history of it, of giving us familiar scenes with slightly either different characters or the situation's a little different. I mean, Michael discovering a member of the family hiding in the attic of that house. We've been through this at least once before with George Sr. I'm trying to think if maybe it's been reprised even between these two examples.
Well, he found George Sr. in 2 different attics, right?
Is that right?
And one in Iraq? Was he in the attic in Iraq? No, the bomb was in Iraq. Yeah.
But it is a real trope that we keep getting. It's actually similar to what's happening with Star Wars movies now, where you get a scene that you've seen this scene before, but with Arrested Development, it's in a comedic way. Just like these characters are just sort of fated to play out the same dynamics and situations over and over.
Well, while we got that as a segue, I just want to say that if I had a time machine, I would probably try to do some productive things, but I first might just go back in time and tell like 14-year-old me, in 2018, you're going to watch a Han Solo movie made by Opie.
Yeah.
And what would you have done? What would you have done?
I
just fucked with myself. What else can you do?
But what would the young you have done? Would he have screamed? Would he have gone to find Ron Howard and say, "You've got to let me do this"? What would have happened?
I have no idea. He didn't know what he wanted to do at that time. Maybe it would have.
Maybe it'd been like, I don't care. So
you just made fun of my beard.
Probably. So there's a quote here. Well, who wants to talk? I'm sorry, I've been kind of talking.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I wrote a quote down. It's Ron Howard, and he's talking a bunch in the face. And he says, there are some moments that are hard to take back. Moments that create too great a shift in dynamics. Unearthing. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry.
This is about the punch.
Yes, he's punching him. An earthquake. Okay. There are some moments that are hard to take back. Moments that create too great a shift in dynamics. An earthquake in a family that shatters both members' notions of themselves. It was a great quote. It was a heartbreaking quote. I think it's the start of when this thing starts, like you really start wondering if it's going to be a drama or soap opera. And then I asked, I don't know, has this happened to you? But then I thought, we're not going to say that. I thought, well, did it happen to you in a very casual way? But I don't even know if I could answer that.
Are you referring to the phenomenon of a dad fight?
Yes. No,
I've never punched my dad. And this too, I mean, dad fights is a reference to boy fights. Right. In earlier seasons was George Sr.'s one of his many ways of exploiting his children by getting them to fight with each other and filming it for a direct-to-VHS series that he sold called Boy Fights. Right. So, yeah, season 4 ended with George Michael punching Michael in the face after learning that they have both been seeing the same woman, Ron Howard's fictional daughter, Rebel Allie, played by Isla Fisher, and that they have been sort of deceiving each other. Michael has known that they were both seeing her. For me, one of the things that made the 4th season feel a little bit bitter and missing some of the whimsy and fun of the original seasons was that the heart of the show was always Michael as the relatively stable Bluth, who is sort of genuinely trying to be a decent person and also assuage this horrendous family and keep this horrendous business going. And the sweetness of his relationship with his son, George Michael, was the kind of sweet sincerity at the heart of this tremendously irreverent show. And one of the things the 4th season did, probably in a well-intended attempt to monkey with the formula in interesting ways, was make Michael just as craven and desperate as all the other Bluths, and make his relationship with George Michael sort of newly toxic. And that all blossomed with this concluding moment when George Michael punches his father in the face. I think that's the very last thing in season 4, in at least one of the edits of season 4. So in this episode of season 5, Family Leave, episode 1, when we revisit that punch, it's paused. So George Michael freezes in mid-punch, and narrator Ron Howard delivers that great couple of sentences that Amanda read.
Shatters both members' notions of themselves. I mean, it's amazing. Like, they changed, George Michael and Michael have changed, but then they both try to pretend it hasn't happened. This show gets serious. It's gotten serious. I don't know. It got serious this time.
We do spend an awful lot of this first episode recapping season 4, and that's an interesting thing going on here, as Amanda raised. There is a lot of recapping, and another thing that has happened with both of these new seasons is we've retained the structure of act breaks and places where commercials would go if it were on a network, and yet, in so many ways, the 4th season especially was kind of the first streaming original. It was the first Netflix series, or one of the very first. And the unique format of the 4th season was spoken about a lot at the time as, this is created specifically for Netflix, and how novel that was as recently as 2013. But it's strange because it's a combination of, on one hand, it's clearly for this new medium, and on the other hand, it retains a lot of the word I can't think of network sitcoms.
Yeah.
Tropes. It retains a lot of the tropes of network sitcoms. When George Sr. is introduced, we get a very blatant reference to Transparent, which I guess at that moment it was impossible not to think about the extenuating circumstances. For me, the storyline that's continuing from season 4, in which George Sr. has lost his testosterone, was a bit of a drag already, and now it does feel kind of like, even if you put everything else aside, Jeffrey Tambor hasn't been given anything richly funny to do yet.
Yeah, But now you've said you've only seen the first 4 episodes?
Yeah, maybe 5.
Okay. So I don't want to ruin anything for what's going on later.
Uh-huh.
I keep falling asleep.
But I do feel like his character didn't have as much to do in this season that I found entertaining as he had in past seasons. And I felt kind of the same way about Tobias.
Yes.
I have been... oh yeah, I was going to say this overshoots episode 1 a little, but we can talk about anything we like.
Oh no, yeah.
But it actually does start in episode 1. The Lucille and Tobias therapy scenes, I think, are nice, and for me, they've been a highlight of these new episodes. And I think it's always been a kind of low-level running gag that Tobias is actually kind of a good therapist. I mean, it's the one thing we see him do with some confidence and with some competence and expertise. He actually seems to know what he's doing as a therapist and always has.
Jessica, what's her name, looks better than anybody I've ever met in my life. And I mean, like, she looks better than the rest of the cast. She looks amazing.
Yes, she does.
Jessica Walter.
She wears, you know, in season 4, she wears like a whole Elaine Stritch thing. She just got tights and a shirt on, and you're like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding?
So every now and then I will be watching some cornball sci-fi thing that both of you would hate, and she will show up as some kind of space senator or something.
When she was younger or at this time?
You know, younger or leading into this time. So, you know, probably around the like late 80s to mid 90s, she was doing a lot of, you know, that's right, Captain, and my forces will be there if you don't respond properly.
Got it. Interesting.
When you're watching that
Gams.
When you're watching that cornball stuff, do you ever burn your arm on the side?
Oh.
And then Richardson yells at me, yeah.
So maybe he's in Lucille 2's apartment. Lucille 2 is missing.
Yes.
Lucille 2 has been missing since Cinco de Cuatro. And Michael doesn't remember anything because Job gave him a forget me now. And so he doesn't remember seeing the outline of her body, which is weird because why would the outline of her body already be there? And blood. And Buster said he saw it too. So now maybe he's in Lucille's apartment. She's cleaning up every sex toy known to man. And then it didn't occur to me. I didn't see it until the third time we watched it that the actual housekeeper walks out in a French maid uniform.
Yes.
I didn't see that until this third time we watched it. And when he walks past, she's his French maid outfit, walking past him, she's got a dildo for her dog. And Michael says, it's like the Weimar Republic up in that place.
Yes.
And that's where Liza Minnelli lives. And it was just wonderful. I just laughed and laughed.
Can we talk about Rebecca Drysdale as Lieutenant Toddler? It was really great. And her scene in this episode with Jason Bateman is really terrific. She's introduced, you only see the back of her head, and you think it's going to be Lucille Ostero, Lucille 2, played by Liza Minnelli, who may or may not be dead, and who Marc-Anthony may know by now, but the season is clearly a murder mystery and is teasing her presence, and we don't know if she's alive or if we'll see her.
Right.
But Lieutenant Toddler, who gets to question Michael at the door. That's one
of the best names ever to begin with.
Yeah, truly.
Just a great thing to say.
And if you made a list of the 10 best TV names ever, at least 5 of them would be from Arrested Development.
There's a good chance.
It is a series that has always named its characters brilliantly.
I mean, because if for no other reason, Bob Loblaw's Loblog is
Bob Loblaw's Loblog.
And who's this new woman?
Lottie Dottie for District Attorney.
Yeah, it's so good. I have an endless appetite for that.
Lottie Dottie for DA. Oh my God, that's hilarious. I was going to say something else, but I can't remember what it was because that was too funny.
That is great stuff. And we also have
no, she's the kind of woman that like, she's the kind of human. She's the character is the kind of human that like I wouldn't mind sitting at home and cleaning and cooking if that person came home to me every day and was like, I'm here to protect you. I'd be like, yes, you are, and yes, you will, and let's be in the 50s because you're awesome. It would just be great. Be great. No offense, Noah. I like our relationship better.
I would also choose you over Lieutenant Toddler.
Thank you.
Nevertheless, she is wonderful, and her scene with Michael is great, and it includes the reincorporation of the dying postman. Also, Michael, as he has so many times before, gets stuck having to live in a lie that he has established. You know, like he says that he's a maritime lawyer, and now he's got to do that for 5 episodes. Here he lets slip that he always says goodbye with the phrase "I love you," because he has to explain why it says that in the note he left for Lucille.
Why did he even write it in the first place?
To keep Lucille to stay on her good side so that she'll bail out the company, I suppose. Okay. So when the elevator door is closing between them at a
painfully slow rate.
Painfully slow, yeah. And he says goodbye several times, and just before it closes, love you.
Their elevator and Frasier's elevator are the slowest closing elevators in the world.
Those elevator doors are built for dialogue, intense exchanges of dialogue.
Love you. Beautiful. Yeah. And when she says a new start and he tries to say anal rapist and anal rapist, that's very funny.
Yeah, I mean, the show is very good at recalls and reincorporating its incredible back catalog of established jokes. But you can only do that so much. I think after the first episode, the other new ones that I've seen do a lot more in terms of adding to the story. I think the first one is, at least half of it is either literally recapping what's already happened or sort of reviving some of the greatest hits from jokes from the past.
When George Michael starts tearing up his old bedroom, you know, they allow it to do it that way as well. You start seeing like the recap in a way that's not necessarily a recap by Ron Howard or a bunch of past footage.
Yeah, it's a couple episodes later, but for me, one of the biggest laughs that I've seen so far this season is when he's going through his bedroom and he finds his old Quicken.
Yes.
Oh my God, Quicken! Only George Michael Bluth or Amanda Sisk.
Now it's all online and it sucks.
But nevertheless, this episode did add a lot of really good Arrested Developmentisms to the lexicon, including maybe the best is shame wow, the shame wow that Job needs.
The shame wow.
To mop up his shame.
No, I have a huge relationship with the ShamWow because I'm a clumsy person. And at work, once a coworker bought a bunch of ShamWows for me. And whenever something would happen, we'd yell ShamWow, 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 and get it. And then even when we ran out of ShamWows, we'd scream ShamWows. And every time we drop something, you say ShamWow. And that is a short way of saying I loved ShamWow, which everybody does. But Noah, you skipped over rapists and murderers.
Oh, that is great stuff. That is a really good scene.
Okay, how do you think that was written? How do you think that was written? Do you think a bunch of writers in a writer's room did that? Do you think one person? I mean, how do you think it was said to somebody when they were younger? Like, this has got to be real. This was real.
It's really good on 2 levels, too, because, first of all, just the idea that these are Lucille Bluth's, aphorisms that she's raised her children on, and it's things like a friend in need is no friend indeed. It's all the opposite.
We forget, but we don't forgive.
Yeah, so that's great. And then the way this stuff comes out in this great dialogue scene with Michael Cera and Aaliyah Shawkat is just so good. And that rapists and murderers thing, which has already had some very amusing callbacks in the next couple episodes, it is wonderful.
When he says most likely the guy had been raped, or whatever. What does he say?
Yeah, right. Most likely that guy would probably be raped too.
Anyway, I gotta, yeah. Take all the
And
rapists and murderers. Wait,
it's a really good
take
example.
all the rapists and murderers and put them in one place. And all the rapists will rape the murderers, and the murderers will murder the rapists until you're left with two rapists or one murderer who's been raped. Okay, great.
Yeah.
It's really a good example of this show doing what it does better than any other show and doing it really well, which is make something hysterically funny and also inoffensive, where people are just throwing around murder and rape, and you know, it's a tightrope walk and a successful one.
I don't want to sound like a geek, but isn't that Arkham Island? Isn't that what that's called? Where all the rapists and murderers are?
Oh, you mean Arkham Asylum?
Arkham, yes, Arkham Asylum. Where is that supposed to be? It's supposed to be out in Governor's Island or something.
Yeah, I guess it's some kind of like Alcatraz like thing off the coast of Gotham.
The coast of Gotham.
I may or may not have that right.
No, that sounds. I mean, I think it's gone through different permutations, but basically, it's a mental ward for the criminally insane.
And then they put the gas on him and let them all out. Nolan did.
Right. You know,
anyway, okay.
Which incarnation of Batman you're talking about, and you know where the pearls fell when Mrs. Wayne died.
Tell all your friends.
Boarding school romance.
Boarding school romance. Between Job and Tony Wonder.
I've never heard that phrase, but I'm sure that phrase is common, or was it common? Like, I don't know this phrase.
I thought it was a coinage.
I didn't look it up on purpose.
I like a way of describing this relationship between Job and Tony Wonder, played by Ben Stiller, which I thought was one of the real high points of season 4, that relationship. And it's interesting that now, as of that storyline, Job has kind of taken over the Tobias territory of being the gay straight guy.
Right.
Or the straight gay guy.
Which, you know, could be another reason that Tobias isn't as funny to me anymore.
Yeah, Tobias, these episodes are already kind of making a thing out of the fact that it's not like, why is Tobias still here is kind of a question.
Yes.
He and Lindsay having separated. I don't know. I so far, yeah, I guess he hasn't had a lot to do, but I've enjoyed what he has done. Whereas season 4, I felt made much more extensive use of David Cross, but a lot of the Tobias stuff in season 4 didn't quite. I wouldn't have put on my list of favorite elements.
So let's talk about Maybe's retirement community.
Love it. Want to live there. I've always wanted to live in a retirement community. You eat early. They give you Jell-O. It's awesome. There are exercise classes. There are ducks and shit.
I know.
These are good ones. These are good ones.
Across little babbling brooks every day.
Now let's be clear. There are some really awful old people places, but this is our elderly places or whatever. I'm just digging myself further. But
how is this decrepit?
But this place is a very nice place. It's like the place for actors in Love Marches On. It's like the place for actors in Sunshine Boys.
Yes.
It's very nice. So yes, I would like to live there.
And it's also a continuation of this great use of maybe. Like, maybe can be anybody now. You just can, even to the point now of different costumes and looks and characters. I mean, it used to be that they figured out how to put her in new contexts and make it funny, like when she became a Hollywood executive. But now she's almost like a Jean Parmesan level assumer of alternate identities. I love her whole character when she's in that retirement resort.
I can watch, you know, like a daily sitcom of just her being in this, you know, playing bingo and shit.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I think in general, it does feel like the intention behind this season is to make something more like the first 3 seasons, not just because there's sort of explicitly moments when the whole cast or most of the cast gets together. Portia de Rossi, who has retired from acting except for Arrested Development, she now sells paintings. Seems a little edited in sometimes, but you know, when Michael arrives in the Lucille 2 apartment and the whole family greets him, it feels like the show is sort of saying, see, we got them all together for you. And the original narration is back in the intro, which season 4 would have all these clever variations on the old and now the story of a wealthy family. It seems to have been re-recorded by Ron Howard, but we're back in the format of the original seasons. I'm jumping around in my notes here, but another thing that I found so funny is carrying over from the 4th season is the idea that George Michael, doesn't know who Lucille Ostero is, has never met her.
Yes.
And this is a good example of the meta quality of this show. Like, all the time on ensemble shows, you do have 2 characters you can think of who never cross paths and don't seem to know about each other. But when is it ever acknowledged like this? Every time her name comes up, I don't know who that is.
What was I just had something I was going to say about that and I totally forgot it.
Did we lose Amanda Sisk? Oh, there she is.
There she is. She's back.
Oh, here's a question. What do you think it feels like to be the actor who plays Steve Holt?
Oh, that is a good question. Because, I mean, obviously at some point they sat down to a meeting and they're like, well, you look, no one's going to recognize you. We have to just directly address that.
Yeah, it seems very brave of that actor.
Agreed.
Who originally played a high school jock, handsome big man on campus type who maybe had a crush on and dated. And in seasons 4 and 5, Steve Holt is older, balder, heavier, and other characters don't recognize him. Also, Mae Whitman as Anne, who I haven't seen yet in these early episodes, but I assume we'll see her at some point this season. Similar thing. This is a show that has always been very willing to sort of humiliate its cast.
It does. I mean, but it's fascinating because there is you can definitely feel the love between the cast. But there's such a mean spirit to the comedy itself that it seems like that's carried over a bit into the behind the scenes stuff, and they're all fine with that.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, I mean, it certainly plays well. The Steve Holt stuff, him kind of horning in on George Michael and maybe is quite good. Primos, which is a revival of the old Hermano and Tio thing. Yeah, but I wonder what it's like for that actor, and I wonder about that for Mae Whitman too. I mean, she's another person who, partly on the strength of her work on Arrested Development, has become a well-established performer and has done other things and is really good. But her role on Arrested Development has been to just be dismissed as the most forgettable, bland possible
completely
presence.
Ignored or glossed over or not even noticed.
Yeah.
Her,
yeah.
The last thing I have written in my notes is, and am I echoing? I'm having all sorts of sound problems.
You sound fine.
Beautiful. The last thing I've written in my notes is one of the best lines, I think, so far is, "I'm so hungry I could eat."
Yes.
So good. I'm so hungry I could eat. Anyway, that's the last thing I have in my notes before I stopped writing today. Oh, I probably have more in my notes from last night. But I'm not going to read my journal to you no matter how many times you ask.
I have a note, another thing that this show has always really done so well and continues to do so well is put in little incidental gags that are so tiny you really don't catch them maybe the first several times through. I guess episode 1 I've seen maybe 3 times in the last 2 days in preparation for this. So I noticed things like when we're panning around the magazine to see the various prizes that were awarded, and one of them is just ice cream with Gene Parmesan, which is great. And then also to entrap a local predator in the scene where John Beard, the host of To Entrap a Local Predator, comes back to the model home to remove the hidden cameras. When it pauses him, and you see on the screen, it says something like he had been fished out, and you see fished out on the screen. But just before the wipe that takes that away, it says at the bottom of the screen, all new creeps. Next season of To Entrap a Local Predator.
All new creeps.
Of David Cross.
Ooh.
But a lot of it's biased.
Sorry, had a little. See, sound troubles.
Couple of sound problems.
Yeah. So what's next? What happened next?
Well, I think the episode 1 of season 5 that I think we've hit the high points. You know, the last things that happen of significance are Michael and Lieutenant Toddler ending their exchange, as we've talked about. And the very last thing is Lucille and Tobias at the cottage, continuing her
the cottage
therapy.
where Michael's wife died. So let's talk about this then. Let's talk about how sad and serious this season is, how deep and emotionally it is, and how it's going deeper into the surface wounds that were so funny. And now it's going deeper into them, and they're becoming more sad. Like, I don't know, and it's maybe because everybody's getting older, too, and you realize that there's not a whole lot of time to change what you're doing. You're going down a course. I don't know. It's just, it seemed very sad to me and dark.
I do agree. I think that it's spending a lot of time dwelling on the actual repercussions of the lives they've been living, and how that's affecting them emotionally, which hasn't really been much of a focus before.
I feel like it's the last episode of Seinfeld stretched out over, several episodes.
That's interesting.
That's I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy.
You do think about Seinfeld a little bit with Arrested Development. I mean, as the Seinfeld, which is kind of one generation of sitcoms before Arrested Development, was so remarkable and I suppose revolutionary for its density and quick scenes and short gags, and how it just seemed to have more comedy packed into one episode of Seinfeld than any sitcom we had seen before. And Arrested Development almost seemed to kind of take the dare to see how much further you could go with that. Of course, it's a one-camera show without a studio audience and has 10 times the mobility of Seinfeld. But it is building on that mandate for density.
And dense it is.
Dense it is. And things also that we later would associate with Family Guy, which I have never been a big fan of, and 30 Rock, which I am a big fan of, the business of cutting to like a very elaborately produced 5-second illustration of a gag that most shows would have just let be a line. Arrested Development will cut to exactly what we're talking about, and sometimes done up so elaborately.
Well, I feel like that with Arrested Development, though, it's often something that we've actually seen and happen in the past, but then it might be elaborated on slightly in that flashback. I think it seems like it does less of the trope of just creating a flashback out of nowhere that doesn't actually have any context within the rest of the narrative. Like this,
yep.
It's something that does affect things, as opposed to, like, that's one of the things I can't stand about Family Guy is it's just these little wretched flashbacks out of nowhere that aren't that entertaining.
Yeah.
Oh, like the time.
And they have nothing to do with anything.
Oh no, like the time you blah 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 flashback. Well, what about the time I blah blah blah? I mean, it's just ridiculous. It makes me insane.
You know what? If someone tells me that they love Family Guy, I think less of them, and I don't think less of myself for thinking less of them.
Yes, I feel the holistic feeling that you're putting out there. I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Okay. Okay.
But yes, the oh my god, the flashback. But it's like the flashback of it led to one of the best parties they'd ever had. It led to one of the best
Oh yes.
parties ever, and it's 7 seconds of Tobias like doing the Charleston and like people like singing and Buster like laughing and then he goes back. I mean, that's all it was, and it was the best flashback ever. Because if they tried to make it a party or make something out of it, it would have been different. But just this was the best Bluth party ever.
I think the narration says it was one of the Bluth's better parties.
Oh, whatever.
So it wasn't quite hyperbole.
It was one of the better ones.
One of my favorite no context flashbacks was Buster in archaeology school.
Oh yes,
with the skull, and he just can't help but crush it with the hammer. Like because that is me. That's why I couldn't. You can't put me around delicate things because I just want to break them.
Is that why you broke me, Marc-Anthony?
It is. It's exactly why I broke you. No, I broke you because you killed my sea monkey.
I know. I'm gonna be Cobra Kai and I'm gonna kick you in the butt.
Talking of flashbacks, we had a flashback to George Michael as a little boy being instructed in scuba diving along with Michael. I found that a very pleasant flashback. I thought that little boy did a great job of playing a young George Michael. It was very convincing. And it also seemed to be maybe a sort of meta joke about how Jason Bateman has always looked. He can play him.
They gave him that hat.
They did put a hat on him.
Since Family Ties.
He can kind of play himself at any age. However, in the flashback with George Michael as a teenager, I don't see why they couldn't have just had Michael Cera do that scene with where he has his hair is all wet and he's got the scuba gear on, and this kid is doing a very good Michael Cera impression, but Michael Cera could still have done that. I think
they could have done that. I mean, considering they've already played a lot with his age, and you know, I think that. Speaking of which, I think that's another thing that's funny about this is since it's been a significant period since the 4th season came out, this season is still technically set that year, which, you know, places it in a very different place than we are now, and that affects the way that the show works, and I think that they dealt with it pretty well.
It certainly has been getting a lot of mileage out of setting itself in the political context of 2015. I mean, that's coming up in future episodes, but my goodness, in episode 2, the moment at the Mexican border when they talk about they were deported due to the cruelty of your president, Barack Obama. And that, I mean, that is really true. Before our present catastrophe set in, one of the liberal complaints about President Obama was record deportations. It's part of why the madness on the right about immigration is so incoherent. That was very clever. And of course, they have some fun with the Trump announcement also in episode 2. And the whole idea of a border wall.
She suddenly stops delving into herself. She stops opening up, and you think she's going to become this different character maybe, or she's going to learn something, or she's going to find something within herself with Tobias, and then suddenly this happens and you see her just go click and everything goes back to who she was because she has something to fight against again. And at that point she had nothing to fight against, and suddenly she has this thing to fight against. She goes, okay, this will be interesting. You know, she's not bored anymore. And you aren't sure which you'd rather have. This the entertaining one or the one who's going to learn about herself, because boy, she's going to be such a hard thing to watch. For a mess. She's gonna be a mess for a while.
A hot mess.
A hot mess.
Oh, you're a hot mess.
She learns about herself. Is that what you're saying? When she
what?
When she actually opens herself up, that's when she's gonna be a hot mess. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
If she keeps going with that, she's gonna just be a hot mess. So maybe it's just better. Yeah, she stop.
Yes.
And just push it down again.
Right. Just ice your heart over, maybe.
I am from the South. I am very schooled in the art of pushing it down.
Did you see her in Pee-wee's Big Holiday or Pee-wee's Big Vacation or whatever it was called?
I only saw The Adventure.
No, not the big. It was. I think it was Big Holiday.
No.
Well, I don't know if you don't like Pee-wee, don't watch it. But I love it with all my heart, and she's hilarious.
I do like
Big
Pee-wee.
Adventure.
Yeah. If you like Pee-wee's Big Adventure, this is a lot of fun.
Okay.
It has probably the funniest 3 minutes involving a balloon I've ever seen on film.
What about Chaplin with his ball? Would you consider that a balloon or a ball?
Oh, the globe dance and the Great Dictator.
That's for you, MA.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if that's.
If it's
I've seen
better or
Great
worse.
Dictator, but okay, considering that I don't remember it that well, I must prefer Pee-wee's balloon.
Wow.
Pee-wee's
Okay.
balloon.
That's
Pee-wee's
a
Amish
ballsy
balloon.
thing to say. I respect. Much respect.
But do not get me wrong. I love Chaplin with all my heart. So I mean, no
understand.
disrespect.
There's some nice balloon stuff in The Great Muppet Caper.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's
Hot air
true.
balloons.
Yep.
Yes. There's 99.
Wonder what it's
balloons.
like to plummet.
Well, we've been on for an hour. Do you guys want to go on to episode 2 and make this a double, or what do you think structurally?
I don't know. We got 4 people watching. 3 of those are us. So hello, new person. 5 people watching.
Oh, well
Welcome
then I think we better cover.
Let's continue to episode 2. We'll
Welcome
do episode 2, and then we can come back to
they
do
don't wanna
episode
watch us
3.
live, this fifth
Maybe we'll do
person.
3
They're
and
like,
4
oh,
next
God.
week.
Yeah.
What did you say, Amanda?
No,
The 5th person does not want to watch us live. That's why they signed on now. They're like, I do not want to watch this live. It's just, I don't know why. They feel too close to us or somehow. Where did he go?
Marc-Anthony?
I'm making tea.
Oh, there he is.
Where did he go? I think the public demand got to be too much when you have this many,
Take it.
when you have this audience that rabid for your views.
Well, okay, so what is the point that they're trying to... Well, you and I, we can't answer all these deep questions because Marc-Anthony's watched it all and we've only watched 4.
Well, episode 2 episode 2 really... for me, after episode 1, I thought, my basic feeling was kind of like, okay, I'm with it. There was enough good stuff in episode 1 that I felt like, okay, I'm glad that it's back. Episode 2 made me feel even more that way. It made me feel like, okay, we're getting some momentum going here. At the very beginning, Michael and Kitty have their scene at Imagine Entertainment.
Kitty's amazing now.
Yeah, she's another character who serves any purpose.
I want to be Kitty. She's great. She has a fantastic outfit.
Yeah. But I mean, George Bluth's old secretary from the original series has become very prominent at Imagine Entertainment.
Yeah.
The Arrested Development version of Imagine Entertainment. Does anybody have the exact wording of what it says on the sign?
I haven't been able to catch it. I keep meaning to pause it there, and I haven't been able to catch it. But
it's like something about the drop of water.
I just think that the Brian Ron thing is so funny. It's so funny. That
what was it? Ron needs to be loved, and Brian's need to avoid conflict or something. I mean, they have to buy the wigs together, and it's wonderful.
The sign says the sign says Imagine Entertainment, where dreams drop into make-believe as surely as a drop of water falls into a bigger thing of water in slow motion.
Say it again.
The sign on the Imagine Entertainment headquarters in Hollywood, big sign, Imagine logo. It says Imagine Entertainment, where dreams drop into make-believe as surely as a drop of water falls into a bigger thing of water in slow motion.
Bigger thing. That's really
bigger thing of what? Yeah, which makes me think of Michael eating a whole thing of jelly babies.
Ooh, jelly babies.
Candy beans, I think, actually, is what they're called on
jelly babies.
I knew it wasn't exactly jelly beans, but no, jelly babies is what they threw at the Beatles. These were candy beans.
They probably sell jelly babies in Little Britain.
In Wee Britain.
In Wee Britain.
Right.
Well, do we want to? I mean, Marc-Anthony's watched a lot more of this than we have, but do we want to predict anything?
I
I guess we
will
can't.
I will do the Arrested Development poker face and not reveal
But
how
maybe
close your answers are, or I'll just do something hyperbolically unrelated to anything facially.
So it's like one of these stories is true and two aren't.
Yeah, who knows?
But should we get through episode 2 and then do predictions?
Sure.
Looking at my notes for episode 2, self-deportation, I noticed we actually have hit a lot of this stuff in the last hour. The Primus Hermano Tio callback, and some of the political stuff, Lucille watching the Trump announcement. One of the, for me, weaker threads this season has been George Sr. and Job fucking their way through Mexico. Hasn't really turned out to be comic gold.
No, and I mean, it's it seems like it's something that you could have just done a scene, maybe 2 with that, and that would have been enough, but it went on for way too long.
Yeah, it feels like a premise, but it's not paying off yet.
And I think it's a situation where you're feeling the wrong kind of pity for these guys, and it just doesn't add up to entertainment.
Yeah, that's a good. Ooh, hi. We were just saying that George Sr. and Job fucking their way through Mexico is not our favorite.
It's the most awkward. Yeah, my notebook's out there, actually, the other one. But that I wrote down that it's just one of the most awkward things I've ever had to sit through, and something that I liked. It's not funny. It's like an SNL skit from 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's so bad. It's such a bad premise. It's such a normal premise. Like it's just like it's lazy.
Yeah, it feels like, oh, we need something to do with these two characters, and we'll rely on the actors to make it good. And both actors get off a moment here and there that's funny, including Job's line reading when he says, "I like a 10." Like he says like one word of that line every 30 seconds, staring into space on the Winnebago or whatever it is. But basically, that story is I would put on the list of Arrested Development plot lines I didn't need.
That hopefully won't be referenced in a season 6.
Yeah. However, we get another profane, heavily bleeped rant from Buster.
Oh my God. It's just amazing. But the fact that he starts out with it towards Michael, like it's outward toward Michael, is part of the thing I'm thinking of when he's gained wisdom somehow, or something that makes him more self-aware that every single person has this thing that he can rant about. And so he starts ranting about Michael. Then inevitably he goes to Lucille 1 because it's his mom that is everything. But he does start ranting towards Michael first. But then the thing about with she's drinking and I should never have let you out of mine. He's like clawing at her vagina. It's just hilarious.
Yeah, and this is where like what has changed and evolved about Arrested Development over the new seasons is used to very good effect here. Like the fact that Michael is not in the same position we're used to seeing him in, although it's getting closer to that. Now we're doing interesting things with that premise, like Buster saying like, oh, you always come back, Michael. Turning Michael's biggest character trait around on himself, which is great. The same way now that Michael and George Michael, they don't have the same relationship they had when he was a child in the early seasons, but they basically have decent intentions toward each other. And so like the flavor feels more often correct to me and seems right for what the series is. And yeah, Buster's rant, like of course the comedy of just Buster's histrionics is all you need, but under that there's a really interesting layer of the weird role that Michael plays in this family.
But I do agree, Amanda, that Buster, there's something more confident and assertive about Buster than there's ever been. And yes. I mean, I think it's easy enough to attribute that to, at the beginning of the series, he was so sheltered that a beam of sunlight would make him freak out, more or less. And now he's been through so much ridiculous shit that he has to be slightly more comfortable in his skin just to survive.
I agree. I mean, I don't think this Buster would put Cheetos in front of a Roomba to try to bring it back to life. Which is really just brilliant, though, to put Cheetos in front of a Roomba and watch it eat them up. But I don't think he would do that. I think he's okay. He's up in the attic because he knows that Michael isn't going to take care of him. The whole pick a lane thing is also hilarious. And then when Lucille brings it back, she's like, pick a lane.
I want to see her in so much more stuff.
So these characters keep going to Mexico.
Like a spin-off of this character. I think it would be terrible, but it would be fun. It would be like Maude.
Yeah, Mama's Cutting Loose is what that spin-off would be called.
Mama's Cutting
Loose.
Her Ethel Merman scene in the original seasons. So these characters are constantly going to Mexico and coming back from Mexico. It's this constant revolving door between Mexico and the border. And but this is where we get the George Michael Maybe and Steve Holt trip to Mexico, which has some wonderful moments in it, including Senor F.A. Nice, different spin on an old joke. And a great line from Michael Cera, maybe one of the best lines of dialogue in this new season, or even in the whole series, when he asks, "Who are these scary, handsome Mexicans on those magical horses?"
That got a big laugh at the Sisk Diamond home.
It did. George Michael has another great line when he and Maybe go to the bar shortly after that, after they lose Steve Holt, and she says, "You worry too much," and he says, "Yeah, it really keps me up at night."
Keeps me up at night.
That is who that character is.
She got through my double bluff.
Oh, that is great. Yes, really good, really sharp writing. Yes, and in the same scene when Maybe tries to talk about goop and doesn't know what it is and thinks it might actually be go-op, and he says it doesn't make sense, and she says, "Maybe that's what go-op is. Things not always making sense." And Ron Howard's narrator says, "It wasn't." That's also a great line. This is what we want from Arrested Development. It's hilarious as soon as you see it, but it gets deeper and richer when you think about it and rewatch it.
Yes.
They bring it back again when they talk about conscious uncoupling.
Yes.
Which is, what Gwyneth Paltrow did with Coldplay guy, Mr.
Chris Martin.
Sure. I'm so surprised you know that. Good job, buddy.
Hey, I read all the glossies. Okay. Oh, now so there's more of Job and George Sr. on the road, sort of regrettable stuff. But then back to Lucille and Tobias for this wonderful exchange where he uses the hurt people trope.
Yes.
And Lucille Bluth hears that a little differently.
I usually say, "Make people cry, make people cry."
It totally inspires her. Hurt people.
Because what is it that it make people cry leaves out?
Because it leaves out the people who don't want to be hurt.
The people who don't care one way or another.
Who aren't hurt by it's great.
Oh my God, hurt people.
Hurt people.
That's yes.
Great classic Lucille Bluth stuff. The Obama thing we talked about earlier on the Mexican border. George Maybe actually says of those magical, handsome Mexicans on horses, they just look like a bunch of white guys to me, which indeed they do. I suppose at some point, maybe Marc-Anthony already knows, we'll know more about who those guys are, disputing the Bluth's claim to that land. Maybe and George Michael split up in Mexico. Yes.
One of the best things, we missed something from episode 1 and from the very beginning of episode 1 that I really loved was bringing back Mother Boy without saying Mother Boy. I don't think they said it, but bringing back Mother Boy with the
Jackie and John.
We never got to. Yes, we never got to be Jackie and John. He goes, well, actually, we did a couple of times. He goes, so that's not a regret. And Mike said, maybe it should be.
Yeah.
Great
Yeah.
moment.
Wonderful.
Mother Boy, which was
Mother
not
Boy.
the band, by the way.
Right, which was a meta joke about Arrested Development.
Yes.
The rap group. Yeah, that was one great moment in episode 1. So when George Michael and Maybe split up in Mexico, Maybe winds up volunteering as an aid worker on the border, and that's where we get the Obama joke. Then George Michael goes off for his own little subplot with somebody named Shane and 3 people named Noah. Which what can I say, guys? You know, when I was a little kid, there wasn't another Noah in the world. And then I became aware in my mid-30s, I guess, that there seemed to be a lot of little Noahs around, a lot of kids named Noah. And now Noahs are a thing. 20-something douchebags named Noah. I've seen a lot of other people have problems like this, but now I've got one.
I was
no. Now you have thousands.
You
have thousands of that problem.
Yes.
Noahs.
I was one of 4 Amandas in my class. There have been too many Amandas. There have been Amanda S's everywhere. Plus, my last name is awesome, so that's why I'm Sisk. But I don't think they name people Amanda anymore. I think it's old-fashioned. And Marc-Anthony, you just, I mean, come on.
Well, I've met like several Marc-Anthonys. Well,
really?
3. There was one that was in my acting class in college. And
really?
And then there was so I've only met one other Marc-Anthony, I guess. But there's one that keeps trying to friend me on lots of social media.
Maybe that's the 5th person who's watching right now.
But his name is Marcus Anthony Macon.
Nobody's watching anymore.
His name is Marcus Anthony Macon?
Yeah. So he's... and anyway.
Why haven't you friended this person?
Well, because he creeps me out.
He's other you.
Yeah.
He's the upside down you.
He's from the Spock with the goatee universe.
The nether, the upside down. We're talking about the same thing.
But anyway. The other one is a studying the same style of Japanese tea ceremony I am in Paris. So like we connected because of tea and we have the same name. Well, he's Marc-Antoine. But you know.
Well, excuse me. I didn't realize you had friends like that.
Wow, you've got a doppelganger.
Right. But Marks, on the other hand, I've met a lot of Marks who were dicks. I've met a lot of dickish Marks.
I've known lots of Marks of all kinds. Good Marks, bad Marks, high Marks, low Marks.
Punctuation marks?
I didn't know where that was going. Punctuation marks, skid marks, stretch marks.
Stop.
Birthmarks. And Groucho marks. Oh, boy. Oh. Yeah, what did you guys think of the Mexico stuff with George Michael and the Noahs? At first, I thought, like, oh, this is one of these kind of lame threads. But it did actually get sort of funny as an observation of Americans who think they're traveling abroad, but they're just eating in the same food court in another country.
I don't think it's very deep, and I think that's the way it should be. I think Mexico, every time they did something was enough.
Wait, will you say that one more time? You skipped out there.
I don't think that they needed to do anything. They did just at the end of everything they did really kind of nailed it.
Yeah, there's something satirically on target there.
Yeah, but I agree. At first, I was like, I don't want to see this go too far. I don't need to see that much of George Michael and the Noahs.
Yeah,
but it got to a place where I could appreciate it.
And what did you guys think about? Oh well, there's the Trump announcement. I guess we've covered that. But what about all the Google stuff, or as it's described, the search engine that wants to give people unlimited access to information except for its name?
My favorite part of that was the fact that the underwater mapping thing looked exactly like they took the thing off the top of the car and gave it to us.
Yeah.
Like you know that they had technology that would have been less cumbersome than that. And you know the fact that they need to map the ocean, and there's that guy named whatever, and he's from Earth.
Yeah,
Which was
from
a great
Earth,
way of using that.
from traditional search. And yeah, I found the Google stuff pretty amusing in a way that it wasn't. In season 4, Michael having the Google Maps car felt like an attempt to do the stair car jokes again, but not quite as good. But now we're really getting into Google and satirizing Google culture, and that stuff seems to be working pretty well. The Trump announcement, Lucille is watching it on television. She's watching it on a little tube television, which is strange.
It is really weird. It looks like it's in the 50s all of a sudden.
It seems like they haven't been to the summer cottage in some time.
Yeah, I guess so. And she sees him make his announcement about the wall. She gets irate because it was her idea first, which it was. And then he says, and Mexico will pay for it. And she says, now that's a clever twist.
Yeah, I thought that was a really great moment. Just her like being simultaneously angry at and impressed with Trump. It worked pretty well.
It's interesting how, I mean, the Bluth family was very effectively used as a vehicle for satirizing the Bush administration with the Bluth company building homes in Iraq and that plot line from season 2 or 3.
But they started this before they knew that stuff, right? They started this before, I don't know. When
before Trump announced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just folded in so nicely.
Yeah, it's just teed up beautifully.
I guess it's folded up in so nicely because Trump's not the first person to have the idea to build a wall.
Yeah.
And I'm pretending he is.
Yeah, that's true. Just the first person to successfully convince millions of people that he was going to do it. Yeah, so that was but
it's okay, Marc-Anthony.
But that was
okay.
Good stuff.
Give yourself a hug and you're going to be okay. We all love you.
We live in the evil alternate dimension. Things are cartoonishly bad. It's hard to not do that sometimes.
It's really true.
I know. I'm telling you to push it down.
Okay. All right. If Hoochie and Pancake can do it.
Yes, we can push it down every day.
Deep cuts. Deep cuts from our catalog of running gags that have been going on for years. Michael goes home first to the model home and then to the penthouse, and we get this like sound collage of moments from Arrested Development past, which I found kind of.
What is the last thing?
It's kind of. Oh yes, that's a good question. When at the model home, he's hearing all these lines from past episodes. Beautifully done, I thought, and actually somewhat moving in its way. But the very last one, the narrator says something like, Michael felt emotional. And then we hear one last thing. It sounds like something, Regina or something. And the narration says, except for that. I couldn't tell what that reference was. It's something from a past episode, but I couldn't place it.
You're very good at doing Ron Howard doing the narrator. Very good.
Thank you. He wasn't.
So I do want to ask, and we don't have to talk about this, but has anyone experienced, and I don't mean big, heavy things, but like, what do we think of when we think of little earthquakes that happen in our family, or things that kind of the dynamics that change in a second? Because I always think about those things, not even just in our family, but just as those moments that could have happened, or those moments that changed everything. Like, and the example I always give was, it was dark. I had a knife in the dish drying rack. I leaned over to get something, and the knife hit me right here. And now I always put my knives upside down, but I always think that could have been a moment that something huge happened that would have changed everything. So has there been like kind of an earthquake or something? Are they always there? Do we always have them? But there must be larger ones, I guess.
Yeah, I think especially with children and parents, as children become adults, like the way George Michael is outgrowing the relationship he had with his father before. And so you're constantly testing boundaries and figuring out where you stand with each other. And I mean, I never punched my father in the face or anything the way George Michael did at the end of season 4, but you could think of times when maybe you were arguing with your parents when you were an adolescent and you said something, you know, like, I can't think of a specific story, but I'm sure I at some point had some fight with my mother and I said something like, well, you're an asshole, you know, and there's a moment of like, oh, well, we haven't had this before, have we? We'll have to, oh, this is new. Okay, now we have to deal with this.
I do remember, like, I guess I must have been like 7 or 8 whenever E.T. came out. And I was talking to my grandmother about it. I'd just seen it, and I was so moved by it, and I wanted my own alien. And I was telling her about it, and so I showed her a picture from, it must have been the newspaper or something, or maybe I had an E.T. book or something. And she was like, oh, he's so ugly! And I tried to explain that it was like, yeah, but he's really nice, and she just wouldn't hear it because he was so ugly. And I was just like, well, you're a racist, Grandma. Like, that was just really kind of the conclusion that I was like, you will not give this person a chance because of what they look like. So I think that you've got a problem. And
it was one of those moments like, whoa.
It really changed the way, because I, like, in my mind, at that time she could do no wrong and was like the sweetest woman in the world, until I realized that she was going to totally judge someone based on what they looked like. And, you know, granted, in retrospect, she was going to totally judge an animatronic maquette, you know, but...
But you loved him.
But I loved him. He was my buddy, and she wasn't going to accept him because of the way he looked. So it did fundamentally change the way that I looked at it.
Children are very accepting of that stuff. I remember adults having, like, sort of put off reactions to things in children's entertainment when I was a child.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'd be like, you know, isn't Alf great or something? And adults would be, no, Alf really puts me off. He's obnoxious, and what's wrong with him, you know?
Yes. There are some things from my childhood that, you know, now I still feel the same way about. Alf isn't one of them.
The shape of Gumby's head was always something that I thought was, you know, Gumby, who was once a little green slab of clay. And as Amanda once pointed out, if you look at him now, you see how far he's come. Now he's a little green slab of clay. And he has his head is slanted. Hold on, I'll show you. See, if you consider Gumby,
right,
his head is shaped like he has maybe a parted on the side 1950s haircut.
Yeah.
But it's actually just the shape of his real head. And I remember thinking how weird this is, but kids have always accepted it.
I just thought it was a fashion choice he made. I mean, he can blooper himself into anything, and he could make a perfectly square head or round head if he wanted, but he wanted to have a little flair.
Well, his arch enemies had square heads, didn't they? Or cube heads.
Oh, they were cubes. Yeah, they were
blockheads.
Blockheads, yeah.
Yeah. I guess that when we run out of Arrested Development, we'll have to do a Gumby cast.
Gumby.
Well,
is that before or after DuckTales?
Things that I have no interest in doing. Like
Are you telling me? Oh, that was a joke. We don't really want to talk about DuckTales.
You went on and on and on.
We don't?
Oh, maybe we do. Do we? I don't know. I mean, I could be talked into it. Well, see, episode 2 ends with the scene we talked about earlier of Michael walks into the Lucille 2 apartment, and most of the Bluths are there waiting for him.
And Jessica and Mom does that. Woo!
Yeah.
Basically Gene Parmesan. And everyone says, we knew you'd come. And it was like a surprise party, but this horrific surprise party.
Right.
They didn't have a band for the first time. Like, we told you, Michael, which would have been funny, but...
It reminds me a little bit of the scene you referenced earlier, Amanda, when one of the Bluth's better parties, because as soon as he walks into that room, it's like an awkward party, and Job like throws himself at him, and I can't remember what Job is yelling about, but it's a typical over assertion of aggressive physical affection from Job.
Oh, you must be the G.O.B.
Yes.
And he says, Michael says at one point, I can't remember if this is episode 1, episode 2, or later, when he says, you're going to be the next Steve Jobs. And he goes, jobs. He goes, yep, they're going to want jobs. They're going to want money.
Yes.
Good stuff.
Well, what would you predict is going to happen?
Are you suggesting that it's time for Theses of Stone?
Did you have to make that while we were talking?
No, I made it in advance.
Okay. Then I think I should predict. You and I should predict what's going to happen on the show, and Marc-Anthony should predict what's going to happen in each of our weeks. Something that's going to happen during
each of your weeks. Okay. You go ahead.
All right. I think that Rebel is going to end up with someone that both Michael and George Michael hate. Possibly the politician.
Oh, interesting. Reggie Love, is that? No, not Reggie Love. That's Barack Obama's.
No. No, that's his body man.
Yeah, but Love is his last name.
I can't remember.
Is it Herman? He's a parody of Herman Cain, basically.
I can't remember.
Yeah, well, that would be interesting. I predict that at some point in this, before this season is over, Bob Loblaw will appear and will face La-di-da-di-da in court.
All right.
Okay. I will predict that, Amanda, you are going to have an unusual but ultimately delightful encounter with an animal.
Okay. That sounds awesome.
I don't know exactly the nature, what kind of animal it will be, where, or in what way it will be delightful, but this is my prediction that, it'll be like, oh, buddy, or something.
Aw, okay. Is it about the bunny?
What'd you say?
Is it about the bunny?
It's not about the bunny.
It's about the bunny.
Is it about the bunny?
Okay.
No.
Anyway, what's going to happen this week?
Not about the bunny. And Noah, you are going to taste a new flavor that you are very surprised to find you like.
Never. But
I'm going out on a limb here.
You really, really are. This is like a big, big, big bet.
Okay.
I'll have to help you with this, I think.
You're just going to introduce a bunch of new spices? Just goddamn like one of them!
He's going to be asleep and I'm going to start shoving shit down his throat.
I'm looking forward to that.
You're welcome.
So,
come up.
And I think that we should also make predictions about Marc-Anthony's week.
Okay.
I think that Marc-Anthony's going to have tea. I think he's going to make it, and he's going I think he's going to have tea 2 ways.
Okay.
Maybe 3, but probably just 2. I don't think he puts it in a bag. I don't think there is a bag that he buys.
Okay. Marc-Anthony will have tea 2 or 3 ways.
2 ways.
2 ways.
Does that mean if I have it 3 or 4 ways, Amanda's prediction is incorrect? Because you're basically
you
putting me in control
of
making your prediction happen.
Lipton just because I said that.
Okay. Well, what if I was planning on having teas 6 ways?
You mean like, I'm just talking about like the way the tea is formatted, not where you put it, right? You understand that?
Well, but okay, like, for example, today I have a deep tea diver.
A deep tea diver.
Yeah, I got a deep tea diver. So, does that count as a way? Like, if I were to do a deep tea diver, and then the next day I would use my tea sloth.
That's a tea strainer. They're all tea strainers. It's like Pez dispensers are not different just because they have different heads.
All right. Well, I can have steep tea and matcha, which I would whisk. But then, what if I do Nepali and yak milk tea?
Yeah, but that's still steeped, right?
No, that's where you heat up milk and you put the tea pellets in the milk.
Oh.
It is a different way.
Well, you're not going to have that this week. That's what
I might not, but just to throw you off, I might. It'd be nice to me.
You know what? Somebody might come in and just, as you're trying it, somebody might come in and say, Marc-Anthony, look, there's a yak outside, and you have to stop.
Go!
I predict that at some point in the next week, before the next installment of Faces of Stone, Marc-Anthony will have a chance encounter that will lead to romance.
Oh, really?
For whom?
Listen, I channel the truth. I don't explain it.
It could lead to romance for your delivery man. Or
Gumby, my delivery man, has been in a dry spell.
Well,
slab of clay. We'll
see what we can do.
The thing I think is most important is to remember that this is a comedy. And the reason we loved it is because it's a comedy. And comedy has a rich, varied history. And one of those historical booms, a historical bomb, something that set it in motion, is really something that we should all discuss.
But first, first to sum up, Amanda predicts that Rebel will wind up with someone George Michael and Michael hate. They both hate this season on Arrested Development. I predict that Blah 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 will face La-di-da-di-da in court at some point. Marc-Anthony predicts that Amanda will have an unusual and delightful encounter with an animal.
That's the best fortune I've ever gotten.
And that I will taste a new flavor and be surprised that I like it. Meanwhile, on Faces of Stone, Sisk predicts that Marc-Anthony will have tea this week at least 2 ways.
Just two ways.
Just 2 ways. Mm-hmm. Not 3, not 2.5.
And 5 is right out.
5 is right out.
And I predict that Marc-Anthony will have a chance encounter that leads to romance. Finally, we hope that all of our many viewers have enjoyed the return of Faces of Stone to discuss Arrested Development. If you are looking for us, our home on the web is our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/twinpeaks.facesofstone. You know why. And you can find us on all kinds of social media, but just for the sake of concision, on Twitter, we are M_A_Macon, president of Sisk, and Noah Diamond. That's weird. Now, if you'd like to continue with your closing thoughts.
I was just saying comedy's important.
No doubt about it.
Actually.
It's especially important on
Faces
of Stone.
See you next Sunday, folks.
Thanks, guys.